Welcome back to the Light and Life podcast, conversations on faith and life in downtown Colorado Springs. I'm back. Sorry for my weird hiatus. Unexpected.
It's good to have you back, Liza. Frankly, I thought Chris Collins and Chris Owenby just did a terrible job last week. So
I was scared they were coming for my job. Yeah, tell them to get out of there.
No, they did a great job. It was really nice, but it's great to have you back. And
oh, good.
Yep, glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited about what we're talking about today, which is Christians and giving.
Yeah.
And how we should approach giving.
Right.
What inspired this topic other than it's that time,
It's
folks.
that time. It's that time, folks. Yeah. Isn't it funny? It's nonprofit season.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was at something this very morning where they were saying, if you can give $5,000, you can support this operation for one family for 1 year. I was like, I cannot give $5,000 because I my primary giving is to the church, and so. But anyway, yeah, it's that time of year, and so for the church too, this is a time when we look at giving, when we ask people to commit to giving to the church for the coming year. But the thing is, it's not like a nonprofit fundraising banquet when the church goes through this exercise. Mm-hmm. It really is about discipleship. So hopefully we'll get into that, and just that this has always been a part of following Jesus with everything you've got.
Mm. So I know we don't have any sponsors, but I do have a question.
Uh-huh.
What's in your wallet?
So what's in your wallet? Yeah. Can you say it like, is it Samuel L. Jackson?
What's in you? I thought it was
It's.
Oh gosh.
Oh, there's a few of them doing it now.
Oh my gosh, why can't I think of his name?
Yeah.
Haley Bieber used to be Haley what?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, come on.
I don't know.
Okay, it's going to come to me in the middle.
Can we phone a friend? Does anybody behind the camera know? No.
No?
All right, we're lost.
All right, well.
But
anyway.
What's in your wallet? What's in your wallet? Yeah, right.
A bunch of receipts. Crumbled up, maybe an old gum wrapper.
Same. No, I do not put old gum wrappers in my receipts. Not same.
You're better than I am.
Yeah, but receipts, 100%.
Uh-huh.
Useless cards that I never look at or use. I used to have pictures in my... There was a thing where you used to carry pictures of the people you loved in your wallet.
That sounds endearing.
Isn't that sweet?
It is sweet.
It comes from another era now.
Yeah. What was the purpose of that? Just like every time you flipped it open, you're reminded of the people you love? Someone
might say, how are your kids? And
but you always associate that with like, no, I gotta buy something, like I'm not understanding the connection between wallet and.
Well, this is so before the smartphone, before the invention of the, I've got pictures of my family with me, ever always on. I've got 1,000 pictures to show you.
Tim's an Apple guy, just so you guys know.
Back in the old days, back in the prehistory days. You would send your kid to school. Every year they would get their school photo, and you get this tiny little wallet size. You'd clip it out. You'd stick it in your wallet. And that way... Oh,
yeah, like the Life Touch photos. We even got those. I remember that. Okay.
And then you had a picture of your kids. So someone would say, how's your kids? It'd say, and they'd say, I haven't seen them for so long. And then, well, that's the idea. But what would happen is you would have these pictures of your kids that are like 3-4 years old jammed in your wallet.
Forever.
So that's not what he looks like anymore at all. But,
but it's here.
But that was a different era. Mm-hmm. And we're past that now. Mm. So on to our actual topic, probably.
It's the money talk.
It's the money talk.
The dreaded money talk. And I know that a lot of people around church feel really uncomfortable with conversations around money and giving. And, what's the whole mission behind that, the reason behind that? Is it biblical? Is it not biblical? Is it Old Testament versus New Testament?
Exactly. Yeah. And there's people think, just like we talked about politics a few weeks ago, a month ago, people think that the church is out to get their money. So that's something that people say a lot, and not just our era, that goes way back, that people would say, I don't want to get involved in church, they're just after my money. Mm-hmm. And Jesus talked about money a lot. He talked about money as one of the main topics that he would teach about. He would tell stories about money, and the reason was, of course, that where your heart is, that's your treasure, he said. So if you've got your heart set on money, if you're worshiping mammon, if you're worshiping money, that's going to capture your heart. And he wanted our hearts to be free. So, but people look at church like, I don't want to get. So how does generosity feel, for you? When do you like to be generous?
Mm-hmm.
When do you not like to be generous?
So this is something I struggle with often. I do feel like generosity, like the thought of, oh, I could do this or I should do this. Just like the idea of generosity comes to me easily. Not a lot of things do come to me easily, but that is one of them. And I don't think I necessarily struggle with the thought of being generous in a given moment. I think the harder part for me is justifying it later. And what I mean by that is I always want to give freely and rejoice in giving. Yeah. And traditionally I've been able to do that. But I think it's because traditionally I've been in seasons of, not traditionally, when I've been doing that, I've been in seasons of overflow. Uh-huh. And when I don't have that overflow or bandwidth, I feel ashamed to say, but I start to like regret and question my past generosity, and it makes me feel like holding on to things more tightly. But then I, am reminded of, what's mine isn't really mine, and
right.
I don't want my treasure to lie. I don't want money to be the center of my heart, or
right.
And I don't want even my financial burdens to take over my life. So I guess my question to you is, where do you find that balance? Because I think I like to be big or generous. You can be generous in multiple ways. I mean, with your time, with your resources, financially.
Yeah, you want to live in a generous spirit. Mm-hmm. It's that difference between living in a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset. That
exactly.
If I'm really recognizing that my life and all that I have is coming from the Lord is, the old school fathers would call the Lord the undiminished giver. So that means that whenever I give, something diminishes. If I give you my time, I have less time. If I give you my energy, I have less energy. If I give you my money, I have less money. But from God is an undiminished giver. He gives, and he's no less than he was when he started giving. And if you think about that, I want to live my life connected with the undiminished giver. I want to live my life in the flow of God pouring his gifts through me into the lives of others. That's totally different than the scarcity mindset of I've got this much, and if I give that much away, I don't have that anymore. To really, sometimes kicking that out is the prompt to recognize that this isn't something like amassing a certain amount and then packing it and taking care of it and not losing any of it. It's actually living in the receiving and the giving. It's this like channeling of God's gifts. Sometimes pastors would say money's like milk. If you hold on to it too long, it's really life-giving if you send it in the right ways, but if you hold on to it too long, it spoils and just becomes sour. And thoughts like that. When I started before I had a paycheck, my first real paycheck was in ministry. And the leaders that were teaching me in ministry set me up with the idea that just from the outset, run your whole career with a tithe, meaning a tenth of giving. And so I never actually didn't. Like every paycheck I've had, I've lived out the tithe. So even when I think about like, oh, this will be your salary, this will be your budget, the tithe is built in my thinking. And I enjoy now being old. I enjoy looking back.
Being old.
I enjoy being old. And looking back and realizing that, there lean times or times that we didn't have a whole lot of excess around, but the investment of what God was pouring through me went into good things all that time. And I never neglected building that investment in his kingdom. And well, anyway, we've gone pretty far down the road.
Yeah. So you say tithe, tenth,
Yeah.
Do you...
That churchy word tithe means tenth.
And would you say that is just standard across the board? Like, that is how much we should give, tenth of our income?
So in the Old Testament, this was really clearly outlined and commanded, that the first tenth of your fruits, of your profits, of your labors goes to the Lord, goes to the work of the Lord. So that's where that all comes from. And then in the New Covenant, you say, well, didn't Jesus free us from laws and rules and things? Well, absolutely. We don't have to obey rules to gain God's love or God's favor. We're in the New Covenant. It's a covenant of grace. At the same time, Jesus seemed to assume that this behavior would keep going with his disciples. When he talks about it, he assumes that you're going to tithe. Like there's a passage in Matthew 23 where he says, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, oil, and cumin, but you've neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have, which is its own teach. We could teach about that, right? But you should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. So you should have been concerned about justice, mercy, and faithfulness, and still been giving a tenth of your produce. So Jesus kind of he just assumed that we would keep giving, and so a lot of people say, well, the 10% doesn't apply to Christians, but then you ask, well, what should it be then? If we're trying to live a life like Christ, and if you're really thoughtful about that, you come to the conclusion that, well, if I want to give the way Christ gave, then it actually should probably be 100%.
Right, right.
It definitely shouldn't be like, oh, so I only have to give 1% or 0%. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because, when people compare Old and New Covenants around this topic, I was actually listening to a different podcast this morning about this, which is interesting.
But not as good as this one.
Right, for sure. We're sponsored by Capital One. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? No, people say, Old Covenant, give a tenth of, whatever you have. Right. New Covenant, Jesus commands people to give everything they have to the poor and follow him.
I mean,
and so
yeah. I mean, for the rich young ruler's this has got your heart. That's the whole thing, is he's always worried about what's got your heart. And so he says to this rich young ruler, okay, go sell all you have and give to the poor, and now come follow me. And the guy goes away sad, it says, because he had many possessions. And even before Jesus says that in that passage, the scripture says that he had compassion. His heart went out to him. So it's not that Jesus is like, you better turn it all in or you're out. Jesus is concerned about your heart and what your priorities are. And a regular... See, the thing with stuff that's hard is you've got to get into a regular pattern that you've decided beforehand, I'm going to do that. Like, you don't get up, you don't go to bed and think, if I get up at 5:30,
I'll tithe.
I'll tithe. No,
I'll tithe tomorrow.
If I happen to wake up at 5:30, I'll ask myself if I feel like going to the gym, right?
Oh yeah,
that's not going to work, right?
And it doesn't. You're right.
You have to decide beforehand. I'm getting up at 5:30. I'm not even going to ask myself when the alarm goes off. I'm going to find myself at the gym.
That's an option. It's an option to just say, I'm not going to.
That's an option. Did you know?
I'm not going to argue with the alarm.
Yeah.
What's that like, Tim? Give me your secrets.
With hard things, with spiritual disciplines, the more you decide ahead of what matters most, the more you can actually practice these things. So
what's the why?
But, nobody gives to be very honest, I know so few people who tithe.
Really?
Yeah. So few. Average. Do you know what average giving is?
No.
Like, even for Christians, and Christians are more generous statistically than any other group. Even for Christians, the average giving to their church is like, or average total giving is like 2.7%. Just a bummer, because there's so much that could happen in the kingdom if we all actually held the Lord in that regard of honoring God with more giving. But I started out doing it, and the reason I say that is that if you've got a budget going and you've got a life going and demands going, and it takes time to grow in giving. And so I just try to encourage people when they ask me about it. Well, look at what you're doing now. Think about how you could grow in giving, grow in generosity, and as you go ahead, But
let me ask you this. Sorry, my
Yeah.
brain is in a million places right now. Do you think some people in my direct sphere of influence, I think I've heard them say things like, "Oh, I will bring them dinner as part of my tithe," or "I will do this as part of my tithe," and it's not directly to the church, but they do have it calculated out as like, this is my giving fund.
Right.
And on a month-to-month basis, the giving will change.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Is that...
So this is going to sound like I'm out for everybody's money, but my honest answer is I believe we have an obligation to support a local church with 10% of our... So when I talk about tithing, I'm focused on the local church. And there's reasons for that, which we don't have time to... Well, we have some time to go into it with this other thing, but someone says, well, I like to... A lot of people today, like, they want to be generous and they want to control that. Like, I want to be generous, I want to give the money, I also want to, with my money, determine the ends. I want to, which in a positive way is like, I want to see that it's doing good. Like, I want to see what's happening with it. So people are more inclined to give in response to a fire or a particular need or particular ministry than they are to give to their church. Now, here's the thing. When you do that, you're actually still in control. You're still trying to hold on and control outcomes. And when you give in your community of faith, in your local congregation, you're releasing that control. You're submitting yourself more. You're humbling yourself more. And then your heart concerns, you need to elevate those as part of the community of faith. So if you say, look, we're not doing enough for Southeast Colorado Springs, now you're going to come to your church because your giving is going to your church, and you're going to work that out with other believers. And what's going to happen in that is more discipleship for you, more Christ formation for you, more life transformation for you, and also, frankly, a greater impact in the kingdom, a greater kingdom impact because the church is now committed to doing it together.
Wow.
And so that's part of the reason why I hold the old school line. But you know me. You know how hard I am on people.
Yeah. In the parking lot, he actually.
Oh yeah, like I demand people's tax returns.
Demanding.
But if people ask me, I mean, that's my teaching. That's what I believe is good teaching and good for the soul. So I came across this guy online, Russell Johnson. He's a pastor in Seattle, and he just threw out this video meme. He said, I tithe because, number one, it provides for God's house. Number two, it tells God I trust him. Number three, it creates margin in my life for God to fill. Number four, it reminds me that I am not my source. Number five, it connects my money to a kingdom purpose. Number six, it gives my job eternal significance. 7, it transforms my money into a seed. 8, it breaks greed and self-reliance off of my heart. 9, it lets everyone else in my life know that God is first. Tithing is not an act of generosity. It's an act of obedience. And I was just like,
whoa.
Love it. So what I thought we would do is go through each of those.
My eyes just got big, yeah.
Yeah, like go through each of those, like what?
Okay, so hit me with number 1.
All right. Provides for God's house. What does that mean, Liza?
You know?
It's pretty...
You're really putting me on the spot there.
Yeah, right. That's a tough one.
vast,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
should
yeah, yeah.
say.
Yeah, he's talking about your local congregation, the church. Like, we've got this is not a for-profit business. Like, we're not renting space to make like, this is literally the church that we have is the product of the giving of the people that are this church. Like, the church is the people, and the things that we have, the things that we use for ministry, the people that we can pay to dedicate their lives full-time to getting ministry done and to encouraging the church to do ministry, that all comes out of people tithing. So it's just like, I don't know, some people forget that sometimes. I mean, there's sad statistics that like half of the people that are involved in the local congregation, typically there's half of the people don't give $1 to the church. Like, fully involved, half the people don't give $1 to the church. And that's not so good, right? Because you're not growing in that discipleship that says, I believe that I can trust Jesus with everything, including my money. You're not participating in the mission as much, like, you're not invested. You don't have any skin in the game. And there's just kind of an assumption that somebody else is taking care of it, I guess. So number one is just, he says, I tithe because it provides God's house. All right, number two, it tells God I trust him. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that's a beautiful description of what it is. You're giving up control, like you said.
Yeah.
Lord, I trust you to do with this something good, to make something good happen of this the way that only you can, Is
it hard we say the Lord provides. The Lord will provide. The Lord provides. When I say that phrase, what popped into my head?
What?
Like a picture of a family during the Great Depression.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like a chalk drawing on the side of their house. It says, the Lord will provide. Something like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't, we live in such comfort and wealth that when I think, oh, the Lord will provide, I'm like, I don't picture us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so is it hard in our times to see and recognize that God actually provides our resources? Do you think?
Well, yeah, I think about, okay, this is really crazy, but like the Vanderbilts or like incredibly wealthy people in their time. Yeah. Probably still don't have like the
Cunninghams.
Sure. Yeah. Walter, my dad. Yeah. Just really on that grind. I think of like they didn't have, working plumbing or you know what I'm saying? Like even the wealthiest of the wealthy.
Right.
Back then.
They didn't have an HVAC system.
Yeah, which I would say a lot of people here do. Or, I would hope you have a working toilet. I don't know. Exactly. I just, even that is like such a blessing and such a just blindly rich thing that we don't even think about.
Right. You take the average home in Colorado Springs and you place it somewhere else, in the developing world today or in any other period in history. Like if you imagine taking like the houses that we live in and like just picking them up and setting them down in 1830s. We live an incredibly comfortable and opulent life. So I think we actually forget that God is providing the things we need. Like we assume that we have them, and we assume that they're a product of our skill and our work, which we do work and we do get value for the work that we do, and that's important. But we just forget that ultimately it's God that provides, and we need to trust in Him. So to set 10% aside is a way of saying, I trust you, God. Like, how am I going to pay for this? The first thing I'm going to do is set 10% aside. There was a family in my church, my first church where I was a lead pastor, and by the time I knew them, they were running, I think, 2 car dealerships, this guy. But he would get up and talk about tithing every year, because when they were going through the roughest time of their life, he remembers a time when he got $200 for the month, and they gave $20 to the church. It's the first thing they did was give $20 to the Lord through giving to the church. And he would talk about how those were the times that he knew that God was big enough to take care of him and his wife and their young family, and that set him up with a relationship with the Lord that endured to where he could grow in generosity when he grew in prosperity.
Wow.
But tells God I trust him.
Mm-hmm.
Three, creates margin in my life for God to fill. What do you think of that?
I think it's a tad obscure.
Yeah.
Of all the ones that you listed, this is the one that I'm like, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
Because when I think of margin in my life, I think of bandwidth and boundaries.
Yeah, right.
I don't.
White space.
Yeah, like I don't have the margin to do this, or
Energy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm. Like you said, when you give, you then have less of something, and of course we want to rejoice in that. But where's the margin?
Yeah. So I think you could take this a couple ways.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. It creates margin in my life for God to fill. So you're creating space for God to do something in that gap that's now created by consistent giving.
Gotcha.
And so it's kind of like that question. Well, how are we going to pay this bill, or how are we going to get this done? We've created this space, and time again, people will tell those stories about, like, I was up against the wall and we were, didn't have money for the rent, and a check showed up out of nowhere that was for the exact amount that we needed. Mm-hmm. And it just increases your trust in that God. And sometimes when we have so much and we have so much plenty and excess, there's no room for God to show up and be like, see, I care for you. See, I can provide for you. And so it creates that little room of margin sometimes for God to move in. But I think also I've got a friend who carries $100 in her pocket, and it's her, I forget what she calls it. Darn it. But she has a great name for it, but it's like seed money, and she wants to just have it ready, not to get mugged. But
I would hope not. I'm like
no
always ready to be mugged.
Right. Like, her name is Beth, and you can find her at the YMCA. No, like, no names. But she's, if the Spirit moves me to give this money, I've got it right here to give it. And it's not. She's wise. She doesn't give that to someone on the street who's going to go on a binge drink with it or something. Mm-hmm. It's more like a friend or someone who just, these situations come up. So as she prays, she just sees the Lord's, that's where that seed money is supposed to go. Like, right here. It's already prepared. It's a cool thing.
That is.
So I think that sort of creates margin in life for God to show up too. You want to do number 4?
4. It reminds me that I am not my source.
Okay.
Again, it's giving up, that kind of reliance on self or control. I mean, I like to be in control. So.
Yeah.
A little bit of that would do me some good.
Does it drive you to be your own resource?
Does what drive me to be my own resource?
Does the desire to
be in control
and to resource yourself,
I think,
drive your labors, your ambitions?
Yes. I don't like to rely on other people. I don't know if it's a pride thing, or I'm sure it's a combination of a lot of things. So it's almost a vulnerability thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not my source, and I know that, and I'm faced with it. Yeah. More and more every time that I drift away from that thought.
Okay.
I'm reminded that I'm not my own source.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
The more you detach from, like Jesus says, abide in the vine, abide in, oh my gosh, we're at 30 minutes. Heavens.
We could talk about this all day.
So you break the source, you realize, oh my gosh, I'm not my own source. All right, number 5, it connects my money to a kingdom purpose. You're investing in what God is doing. Number 6, it gives my job eternal significance. Like, no matter how good your job is, you want to know that you're making a difference in a big way. And when you're using your resources, channeling that to eternal things that God's doing, I think it changes going to work. Like, I want to provide not just for my checking account, for my investment account or something. I want to provide for these eternal things that I see God doing through my church. That transforms my money into a seed, something that's going to grow into fruit. Number 8, it breaks greed and self-reliance off of my heart. I like the way he says that because it feels like something got cased around his heart, like some kind of slime that hardened it. Now he's going to break that off of there. God's going to do that. 9, it lets everything else in my life know that God is first. Tithing is not an act of generosity, it's an act of obedience. I commend him. I don't know him, but I just loved that list of 9 things. I think those are healthy things for us to think about. It's not about, hey, the church needs to be funded. It's not about, hey, this fundraiser is happening. This is about discipleship. It's about the heart. It's about trusting Jesus. It's about freedom and knowing that everything that you are and all that you have belong to the Lord.
Thank you, Tim. That's very helpful, and I'm super excited to continue this conversation off the mic. But if you have questions or any kind of review regarding this podcast or any of our podcasts, we'd love for you to join in on these conversations on faith and life. So please send an email to podcast@firstprescos.org. And of course, if you're watching the video version on YouTube, please leave a comment. And then we'll look forward to seeing you next time when we discuss how to use your Bible.
Let's use it.
Let's use it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.